It's been over 30 years since the release of Back to the Future 2 in 1989, and since then, there has only been one question on everybody's lips. Where's the hoverboard already? Then in 2013, some arsehole released a product called a hoverboard that was just a glorified Segway without the handle. Those things were so shit. They were like Segways, but worse. At least Segway, you're not gonna fucking destroy your body by falling off it every 5 minutes. The key difference between the self-balancing scooter known as a hoverboard and an actual hoverboard is that an actual hoverboard doesn't have wheels, does it, mate? The entire point of a hoverboard is that it hovers! What the fuck? Hoverboards use magic or science or whatever. They don't use wheels. Could we be more clear? There have been countless claims as to what was the first actual hoverboard, but thus far they've all kind of been Okay, look, to be fair, a couple of them have been pretty cool as forms of individual flying transportation, but the cooler the machine becomes, the less it actually resembles an authentic cinema-style hovercraft. Though it was not the first depiction of a hovercraft, with the idea going back at least decades, the hoverboard seen in Back to the Future 2 are by far the most iconic. They looked and operated just like a skateboard, except they floated a few inches above the ground rather than having wheels. One of the most spectacular things about the Back to the Future hoverboard is that they did not have any source of power. Whatever technology was involved, these devices simply worked, except when over water. McFly! They suspiciously were able to still hover over water, they just couldn't move. No particular explanation was given for this bizarre behavior, and it was just likely an excuse for the writers to have Marty trapped and stationary so Biff could fire up his badass rocket-powered pitbull to chase him across the water. Iconic scene. This is such a good movie. Plans to release alongside the movie, or at least in time for the 1989 holiday season, Mattel quickly got to work trying to build a real functioning hoverboard that they could have undoubtedly sold in the tens of millions. Unfortunately, it turns out it takes more than just a handful of toy designers working on a project for a few months to completely defy the law of physics. Shocking, we know. The world's first hoverboards. The world's first alleged hoverboard took flight in 1955, though it was more of a hovercraft. The Hillier VZ-1 Pawnee was designed for the military by helicopter company Hillier Aircraft. The craft was designed for the US Navy, though the military passed on the Pawnee, deeming it pretty much useless. At peak performance, it could reach speeds of 60 miles per hour with a maximum altitude of about 10 meters. Now, if this was a simple skateboard-shaped means of conveyance, those numbers would be extremely impressive, but the Pawnee was not. It was not that at all in any way. The device was actually a large platform seated on top of two helicopter blades. Though it was designed to be steered by shifting body weight, similar to how one might control a skateboard, these controls were extremely unresponsive, and anyone who tested the device instead relied on using the backup plan, which were traditional helicopter controls situated on top of the platform. So it's just a helicopter, it's just a rejigged helicopter, you assholes. Far from the skateboard-style hovercrafts we'd come to expect, the world's first hoverboard was really just an upside-down helicopter. I mean, honestly, what else would we expect from a helicopter company? Only 6 Pawnees were produced since the military had no interest in purchasing them, and for decades people just abandoned this idea entirely. It wasn't until Back to the Future reignited everyone's passion that more serious attempts were made at this technology. Hoverboard drones. There are a few ways in which engineers have tried to replicate hoverboard technology. One of the first was to use large fans, essentially creating a large drone that could support the weight of a person rather than just an Amazon package. These designs have had wildly different levels of success. You may have seen attempts at this on shows like Mythbusters or The Gadget Show, in which they used leaf blowers rather than fans to create the hovering effect, neither of which was particularly effective. The first drone-like hoverboard that could be considered a success, even if calling it one is a little bit generous, is the Hoverboard, created by a Romanian aerospace company. The Hoverboard featured 36 fans, each powered by its own motor. It was much larger than a skateboard. Unsurprisingly, it's got 36 fans. It could only achieve speeds of 8 miles per hour and a maximum height of 1 foot. It was also pretty clunky to control. It could be controlled either via body movements or with a smartphone, but good luck getting used to controlling it because the battery life only lasted about 6 minutes of flight before needing to recharge. Although that's probably for the best anyway, as the Hoverboard's motors generated 92 decibels of sound, putting it somewhere between the volume of a jazz concert and a nightclub. Not exactly like in Back to the Future, is it? Again, a little bit shit. For those who were interested in trying it out, it went on sale in 2016 for the low price of only $20,000, though they did eventually drop the price to $15,000. You know what I saw that advertised to me the other day? One of those surfboards, like it's called like an e-foil or something, where you ride above the water, and I was like, that is sick. And I clicked on the ad and I was like, I am buying this right now. And then I found out it's 10 grand? Shit. No wonder Mark Zuckerberg's riding around on those beasts. A year later, an inventor created the Omni Hoverboard, another drone-style personal flight device. While the Hoverboard somewhat kept the aesthetic of a skateboard despite being much larger and more like a box than a flat board, the Omni Hoverboard didn't even try. Though it is still considered by many to be a hoverboard, the design completely throws away the board aesthetic and is clearly just a large, mechanized drone. This model performed better than the Hoverboard, setting a Guinness World Record for reaching a height of 5 meters with a maximum range of 276 meters, about the length of 2.5 football fields. Of course, the Omni Hoverboard still has issues with battery life, capable only of short flights, but what it can do in that short amount of time is actually far more impressive. The Omni Hoverboard has only been made available in limited quantities to select companies or VIPs, but it's expected to be commercially available in public next year, a statement they've been making for at least the last 3 years. But, you know, fingers crossed, let's see. Jet-powered hoverboards. Once again, we reach devices that are well outside what many of us would think of as hoverboards, but they have been generally accepted as such, including by the all-knowing Guinness, who need to clearly adjust their definitions because what are you doing, Guinness? There is a line of various models created by French inventor Frankie Zapata, and their performance is pretty impressive. Frankie's Flyboard Air shattered the previous world record by traveling 2.25 kilometers with speeds up to 124 miles per hour and a maximum height of 3 kilometers. I already can tell this is going to be f***ing loud, mate. It's got a jet engine on it. The secret to this level of success would even have made Doc Brown's jaw drop, and that's because the Flyboard Air isn't so much a hoverboard as it is a set of 5 jet turbines strapped to Frankie's feet. This is more Iron Man than Back to the Future, isn't it? The jet engines run on kerosene and have a maximum flight time of about 10 minutes, but with those numbers, you could accomplish a lot in 10 minutes. Frankie has made several improvements to the original model, in part thanks to a $1.5 million grant from the French Armed Forces, which apparently... Legends. Legends. Fortunately, the Flyboard Air and subsequent improved models are not available for public sale. They would be illegal to use in most areas of the United States, thanks to how dangerous they are for an untrained user, and the price point would almost certainly make them unaffordable for the average individual anyway. 5 jet engines. Quite expensive. The French Armed Forces remain hopeful that this could have military applications, and they've been working closely with Zapata, but the future of that endeavor remains unknown. If they move forward with the plan, we only hope that instead of toting rifles, the flying soldiers will instead be lobbing Green Goblin-style pumpkin bombs at enemy forces. Magnetic hoverboards. Finally, we get to the most authentic hoverboard experience, magnetic hoverboards. There are a couple of ways the magnetic fields can be created. The first of these boards was called the Hendo, which was initially funded via Kickstarter back in late 2014. It's a little bulky compared to the original skateboard, but it was by far the closest representation thus far. The Hendo is a series of spinning electromagnets that create a strong enough magnetic field that it will allow it to float in the air. Sort of. There are a couple of caveats here, unsurprisingly. The first is that these boards aren't capable of floating very high. All of the magnetic hoverboards will peak out somewhere maybe 3 inches off the ground, but likely much closer to 1. To be fair, this is a lot closer to McFly's hoverboards than strapping jet engines to your feet, so a couple of inches of levitation should be fine. Absolutely happy to give them a pass on that. The other, much bigger caveat is that these boards only work when placed above a magnetic surface such as steel. The magnetic field caused by the spinning magnets will cause it to repel from the steel, giving it the ability to float. This means that your hoverboard would only work in special skate parks specifically designed for them, something that isn't exactly commonplace or, well, anywhere placed for that matter. But, you know, you could have it specially built. You have to have a lot of money. How much was this Kickstarter? Despite being the result of a Kickstarter campaign, only 10 backers were allowed to purchase a board at a cost of $10,000 each, which is likely a bargain compared to what these are going to cost at retail. Thus far, the Hendo has not seen a wide release, and they're likely still trying to improve the design. Another similar magnetic design was created by YouTuber Hacksmith, or more specifically, his intern Jimmy. This design looked much more like the the hoverboards from Back to the Future. In fact, it looked exactly like Marty's hoverboard from the movie, just slightly longer. It was also prone to bursting into flame, and the engines even got so hot that it warped the steel plate they were trying to hover on top of. Even with those bugs worked out, it was still very similar to the Hendo. Both of these designs require a power source and have a limited runtime, just like the previous iterations of hoverboards. The main advantage of the skateboard design, other than it being the thing we've actually been asking companies to make for decades, is that should it suddenly run out of power, there's no risk of plummeting thousands of feet to your death. And finally, this brings us to the pièce de résistance, a hoverboard that looks like a normal-sized skateboard, doesn't have a power source, and can actually float in the air with a human being on top of it. But instead of sporting the Mattel logo, this sleek board is instead branded by luxury car manufacturer Lexus. And look, it is virtually everything that we've been asking for in a hoverboard. It's also Lexus hoverboard works similar to a maglev train, using superconductors to hover above a magnetic track. It doesn't require a power source, but it does still use fuel in the form of liquid nitrogen, which is required to cool the superconductors to appropriate temperatures for the entire thing to work. It also only works when operated directly above magnets, so Lexus had to create their own special skate park with an underground magnetic track that the hoverboard could ride along. The hoverboard works for about 30 minutes or so before the liquid nitrogen needs to be refilled, and even less on a hot day. The magnetic track was also very thin, so if the rider was not perfectly balanced above the track, the board could just tilt and the sides would catch the ground, stopping it in its tracks. Look, it's difficult and awkward to ride, and even after 6 months of practice, the professional skateboarder used to film Lexus's promo video couldn't ride it well enough to film a 2-minute-long, heavily edited video that still didn't feature him falling off the hoverboard several times. So yeah, it's a no on this one too, isn't it? The beginning of the end. Lexus develops the closest thing to a Back to the Future style hoverboard that has ever been created, and it's unimpressive. They also have no intention to sell them, probably because there's nowhere anyone could actually ride one, and demand would be essentially zero. But are these magnetic boards the beginning of the future of hoverboard technology, or are they the end of all hope? Well, they're kind of somewhere in between. The type of hoverboard people want is something similar in style to what Lexus designed, but that technology is largely at its peak. There are really only 2 areas which could see improvements. The first would be to dramatically increase the number of magnets underneath the track, magnetizing the entire skate park rather than just a narrow track for the board to ride along. This obviously would increase the cost and complexity of building such a park, but it can be done if someone really wanted to do it and had a ton of money to throw at the project. The other improvement would come in the form of room temperature superconductors. While there have been some unsubstantiated claims, many of which involve other requirements like extremely high atmospheric pressure, thus far these just don't really exist, which is a bit of a problem when you want to make something. The discovery of room temperature superconductors could solve the world's energy problems and revolutionize computer processing, well, it puts hoverboards fairly low down the priority list when you think about it, doesn't it? It would be cool though, and then we wouldn't have to worry about powering them because all the energy's free. We wouldn't have to worry about a lot of stuff. But even with all of these other issues solved, the various magnetic hoverboard designs have all demonstrated the same thing. Hoverboards would suck. The problem with a hoverboard is the complete lack of friction with the ground. You can get it moving and hop on, but that's mostly the limit of control a rider would have on an actual hoverboard. The technological innovation of a skateboard floating in midair is extremely impressive, but the spectacle itself is remarkably underwhelming. Steering and performing tricks, nearly impossible, and even accelerating without losing control of the board and falling off is a massive challenge. Look, everybody got really excited after Back to the Future 2 came out that, oh my god, hoverboards, that'll be awesome. We'll definitely crack that in the future, but the reality is we couldn't, and when we could, they were shit. So just stop hoping. We're sorry. Thanks for watching.